Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to come back to River Valley. I loved working here. This place has come so far just over the last few years. Any of you who shop here regularly, Scott and Kevin and the whole team here have done just a great job of really taking River Valley to the next level. So I commend them for that. Just a little bit to add to what Kevin said. I kind of grew up on a conventional farm background. I've kind of shifted throughout the years. I was always a weird kid, and so my dad was always like, what is this, what are we going to do with this kid? He's never going to be a farmer. He's never going to turn out to be anything. He's going to go to the city and do something. And so despite his best efforts, I've always tried to come back to the farm and do things differently there and try to kind of change his perspective on conventional farming. And it's paying off. We've really been able to curb the way we use chemicals, curb the way we grow food in the South. And Laughing Stock Farms was kind of born out of that, and so I still operate on both farms, and I still spend a lot of time working on the family land. I'm responsible for about 70 acres of vegetables down there, in addition to running Laughing Stock Farm. So that's just kind of a little bit of that. Laughing Stock, we have 20 acres certified, but we're only actually producing on about 2 to 3 acres of that, and so we have high tunnels and hoop houses. We grow stuff in the field, as well as in greenhouses. You can find us all over town during the season at farmers markets, Argenta, Hillcrest, River Market. Also on the online farmers markets, Little Rock and Conway, where you can buy from lots of different local growers and get it all kind of at one place at one time. We also do wholesale sales with River Valley, of course, with our transplants in the spring. You can find our organic tomato, pepper, herb, eggplant transplants here. And so, that's kind of what we focus on is production. But I think it's important for me to share things with gardeners and backyard growers. I think there's a lot to be shared across the aisle between farms and gardens. And that's something that I'm really passionate about, letting people in the farm, the garden scale, learn some of the same hard lessons that I've had to learn, very costly lessons on the larger farm, to maybe save you some time and money on your own garden. Things that we all deal with the same stuff. I may be raising 2,000 tomato plants, you may be raising one, but we still are going to have a lot of the same issues and disease problems. And so it's important to compare notes, I think, and that's why I'm here. So we really look at our farm as like a total pie, and we use what we call integrated pest management, and that is not just looking at pests or just diseases. It's looking at the whole farm, the health of the whole farm, and how are all the elements of the farm working together to create healthy plants, healthy soil, just in general health of the farm. So that's kind of what I want to talk. I want to kind of demystify IPM because it seems like a very complex topic, but it really is just looking at a lot of different slices of the pie on the farm. So this is kind of part of our garden. When we started out here, this was all gum trees. We had about 1.5 acres of gum trees like this, every one of them, and so you can see back, this is about 2 years ago, you can see this is some of the root balls. We just have to dig the whole tree up, fall it over, and then cut it up. So it's been quite the process to get the soil right and, getting it level, and it's taken me several years of cover cropping and composting and just a lot of soil building to get there, and a very slow process organically. You can't just come in and blow everything up and drop fertilizer. It's really been kind of a piece by piece, step by step process. So this is one of our hoop houses. This is ginger down the middles. We grow Hawaiian ginger during the summer, as well as turmeric, which comes off in the fall. And these are tomatoes right here in these beds. This is lemongrass over here growing in the side. So I do a lot of tropicals in spring and summer in our hoop houses. I really like that. And the tropicals that I use, there's not a lot of diseases or bugs that go after those crops. They really are pretty clean as far as, cucumber beetle and stink bug don't know what to do with Hawaiian ginger. They've never seen it. They don't even know which end to start eating on. So it's kind of nice to choose things that our bugs don't already know. And this is one of our new ventures here. We're growing hydroponic microgreens on the farm now. This has just started actually just a couple of weeks ago. You can see these are all trays. Each one of these trays is about 12 foot long in a greenhouse. There's 16 of those trays all stacked on top of each other, and this is basil right here, and arugula, and this is clover, and there's sweet corn right there, and sunflowers, and ruby chard is the other one. So you can really sprout anything as a microgreen. So this is something really cool that our chefs have kind of driven me to this. This is not a plan I had made, but several chefs I have are buying this stuff from far away, and they're paying ridiculous amounts of money for it. So me being an entrepreneur, I said, well, that's opportunity. You know, if you're paying a lot of money for something that's far away, then why can't I do it right here and you pay me lots of money for it, you know? So as much as $6 an ounce, you know, I'm really charging about half that. I'm trying to kind of be a value producer. I sell most of them for $2 and $3 an ounce for microgreens, and so that's a pretty cool thing. Fairly unrelated to what we're talking about, but I like to share what we're doing. This is Laughing Stock. You know, this is kind of my trio that kind of helped me brand the name of the farm. I don't do a lot of meat sales, but I like having animals around. There's my compost generators right here, and they always keep things lively on the farm, you know. And if you've ever been around goats or horses, you know it's hard to find a goat and a horse that get along well enough together to stand on top of one another. So, and I didn't pose them or anything for this picture. That was totally just a day on the farm. So to the subject. So what is IPM? You know, I really, like I said, I want to simplify this to where it's understandable, because I think this is the most important part of being organic, to start organic, to continue organic, is to not just react to bugs, not just react to disease, but to have a plan from January 1st to December 31st that allows you to address and plan and make new corrections to the plan. And it all starts right at the beginning with record keeping, soil preparation, and on to planting, forecasting early in the season, and then trapping pests once they start moving and monitoring pests, setting your thresholds for how many bugs are acceptable. You know, there's an acceptable amount of bugs, and then there's kind of a point where you have to start doing something, either remove the plant, begin spray, or do something. You know, there's a point where you have to set your bar and say, I'm going to take action at this point. That if all of your other preventative measures have failed, what do you do when it's reached that threshold? I think it's important to know that up front, and then using other controls, cultural, biological, and chemical controls, after all the other things just haven't worked. And so I think it's good to start out with this plan. Even if you're in a garden, it's good to keep records. It's good to trap. It's good to monitor. These things can be done very inexpensively in the home garden, and each one of those will make success of your plant more likely, you know, if you're able to kind of look at it from all the different angles. I always like to throw this in there. Extension is there. Your tax dollars are paying them to do work. They do free soil samples, and you know, anytime you have a question, start there, because oftentimes things that are happening in your plants you can trace back to soil deficiencies, or you know, it's a good place to begin. At least soil sampling, we try to sample 3 times a year, but at least twice a year. We usually sample at the end of winter and the beginning of fall, and that kind of lets us see, you know, where our program is working, how much nutrients we use through the season, how much we need to put down in the beginning of the year. So, and extension can test for a lot of stuff. You know, if you have specific problems, you take them fresh plant material, they can diagnose a lot of diseases. They can identify pests for you. They can be very helpful. So it's good to use them when you can if you have questions. This is a good visual representation of how much time you should spend in your garden doing different things. I really focus, everything we do is down here. This is 80% of my time and money is spent in this category. And you know, using beneficial insects, using row covers, using you know, good practices is always first. Pesticides and fungicides, those things are always kind of a last effort. You know, you really don't want to do that. Even in organic stuff, I spend more money on the pesticides and that than I do everything else combined. They're very expensive, so I try to target them and be very accurate at what I'm going after, you know, what it is, and how much I have to spray. So really spending your time putting beneficial insects out there, creating good habitats around your garden for beneficial insects, that will save you a ton. You know, it doesn't sound like much, but that really is the key to getting the diversity into your garden, and that diversity is what keeps the big infestations of squash bugs and stink bugs, those things will be held at bay if you have a good, healthy population in the garden. And as you move more to the top, like this chart's showing, you really decrease your diversity as you depend more on the top of the pyramid. You really are increasing your cost, you're increasing your impact on the environment, and you're bringing down the diversity of your species and the sustainability of your farm. And beneficials. So this is where I like to start, because to me, I only spend probably $300 or $400 a year in this category, but I feel like I get the most benefit out of this category because I can release at the right time. I basically have scheduled times when we'll release nematodes, when we release ladybugs and lacewings. I kind of have a scheduled throughout the season where they come from Arbico on a calendar basis, and they come in and I release them. I don't have to really worry about it. And we see other things pop up in between. We may order additional packages of bugs to release, but some of the main ones are lacewings. These are beneficial nematodes that this is in the soil, and so when you put nematodes in the soil in the spring, they really help get that life going, and they'll attack insects that are hatching out of your soil, those nematodes. So things that are emerging, the nematodes really work well for. And then there's other bugs that you can't really buy, but that you create habitat for, like the minute pirate bug and the assassin bug are both, you can't really just purchase them. I've seen places where they offer them, but the way their life cycles are, that it's not guaranteed that they're going to hatch in your garden, and so these are things I've just seen in my perennial plants. The assassin bug is probably something y'all have seen. It's got this really razor kind of spine on its back. These guys are voracious. They eat everything. They eat cucumber beetles. They eat everything at the juvenile stage. They won't eat them when they're full grown, but they eat juvenile stink bugs, juvenile cucumber beetles, and juvenile squash bugs as well. And so they're very good to have around, but you have to build the habitat for them. You have to constantly cultivate and keep them.
How do you build it?
Well, perennials. I mean, that's really, I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about perennials, but perennials stay there all year. And so they're creating a permanent habitat, and so whereas annuals, we're taking them in and out, we're moving stuff.
If your perennials in your garden, your flower garden, and your garden's way away from it, how does that?
Well, that's part of it. Really perennial borders are the way I do everything. That's the way I've seen
from all around your regular garden.
Around the edges, yep.
Okay.
I put between my vegetable plants and the forest, I always have a row of perennial plants. Okay. So that's kind of my line of defense from the forest. Everything's going to come out of the woods. If you live near forest, all your bugs are going right out there and living in the winter and coming right back over. So I consider it kind of my razor wire fence, perennials that kind of screens everything that comes out of the woods. You're still going to miss things, but if you have a healthy border, it really does help.
You're going to tell us what the perennials to have.
I do, and I included a list here. It has a bunch of doubles on it. I messed up on this, but that's kind of a list of southern perennials. And in River Valley, they have a great knowledge of perennials too. That's something I really would look for them for. So like I said, at the end of this slide, I've got all these places where we get stuff at. So if you need notes, this slideshow will also be on the internet, so you can go back and refer to it if you need some.
So what do you have around your garden?
Well, I have a lot of different.
Ones to get these,
I use a lot of salvias and things like that. I think salvias do well in the South. Also, buddleia is one. I just bought another one while I was here, and I'm trying to think of some buddleia. Okay. They draw butterflies. It's like a butterfly plant. Trying to think of specific ones. I use some different. I have a possum haw holly. That's one of my favorite trees out there, and it's kind of a cool perennial. So.
Possum haw. That sounds good.
So
they can be a distance from your actual vegetable garden.
Yeah, I would say within a couple 100 feet. I wouldn't want to go any further than that. The further away, I really, like my perennial bed is right there and vegetables start right there. So there's not much distance between. The further you separate perennials from annual crops, the more you're going to see bugs in there.
I've got my garden to one side of my property, and then I've got my perennials on the other side of the driveway.
Okay.
So that's close enough.
I think so, yeah. I think as long as you have kind of 100-foot proximity, I think that's reasonable. The closer the better, I think ideally you would want to have a perennial next to every annual, but it's impossible to do that, obviously.
I was just going to say, I was asking why there should be a distance between the perennials in your garden. There shouldn't be.
Yeah, really, yeah.
My Aunt Murtis, when I was a little
Okay.
That's German, that's German.
Yeah.
She had it
That's
all
a
around
German
the
thing.
edges of the fence, but she also mixed it, kind of wove the flowers and perennials into her vegetable garden.
Sure. And I think on the hand scale, that's what you get. And I think that's ideally the way to go. I use equipment. I have a walk behind tractor from France, and I have to blow things and just kind of go and move, and it's harder to do that. But ideally, that's woven, diverse. That's the way ideally you'd like to have it.
It was beautiful too.
Yeah, right. Well, and you always have something in growth. That's kind of what I hate about the annual side is there's always a time when it's ugly. You just can't help that. Annual garden is just going to look ugly part of the year. So. But insect exclusion fabric is another way that we really, those of you, this is always the big topic, is how to keep squash, cucumbers, anything in the cucurbit family. That's what everybody's really always looking for. And this fabric really is one of the very few ways you can grow cucumbers and squash successfully, I think, in Arkansas. And, the fabric is fairly opaque. It lets 90% of the light through, the insect kind. It will create some humidity. So you do need to vent it during the really hot times of the year. But for crops like cucumbers and squash that are blooming, the trick is really to time the fabric where you can keep the fabric on them and take it off at bloom. And so we talked about in the last session vine borers, which is another real big issue in squash. The insect fabric can absolutely help with your vine borers because they're coming in as a moth like in late May, early June. And so if you can keep your squash plants covered during late May, early June, and they're not blooming yet, you can really lock out squash vine borers and pull your fabric mid-June. Vine borers are gone. As long as they haven't laid a bunch of eggs in your plants, vine borers have moved on to the northwest after that point. So it's good to always keep an eye under your fabric, not out of sight, out of mind. It's good to check on it, and I've definitely left things under fabric too long and not checked on them, and especially if if you've had squash in those beds before, some things will come out of the soil and all of a sudden they're like thriving under the fabric. And you can really increase disease and bugs under the fabric if you're not managing and keeping a good eye on it. But it really is, as a cultural control, this fabric, I make a living with fabric because, from frost control to insect control, this fabric really is the cheapest way to do those things. And I can buy rolls of this stuff, like 2,000-foot rolls for like $100. I can cover acres of plants with this kind of fabric.
Can you get smaller portions? Like
You
these?
can, yeah. I know that River Valley has carried some different types. Nick, you might be able to speak to that. What do you guys have right now as far as?
Right now, for insect control, we really don't have any. It's something we're looking into.
The lightweight kind of stuff, yeah.
Yeah, right now we've just got kind of that landscape fabric, but
Yeah,
we've already, from the first session, we've already got some ideas of what we need to
right.
kind of expand that. So
Yeah.
we're looking for it for sure.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, and I think that's really it. It comes to demand. We need gardeners and, we need you guys out here wanting to try stuff. That's what it takes to get businesses like River Valley to stock things, especially in the organic world. They can't just go out and buy everything they think is going to sell. They really need people saying, hey, we're going to buy this, we need this. So it's important for you all to demand it. That's a big part of organic agriculture, is that we as the growers have to demand the products that work, and that then folks like Nick and Kevin can put it on the shelf and have it there waiting for you. So we use these metal hoops. I buy conduit from Lowe's, like electric conduit. It's like 1/2 inch that run electric wires through, and we can bend that stuff pretty easy. I use a small bender, and they're like $1 a piece for that conduit. So I have a couple of thousand. I think I have like 1,200 or so of these hoops that I can use. Yes, ma'am.
Our son does that in Illinois, and he uses PVC pipe.
PVC too? Okay.
It just bends right over, and he puts a larger pipe in the ground, and so the ends just go right
Stick down. I've seen that. Yeah. PVC. The problem in Arkansas is PVC just wears out. Especially if you're bending it and stressing it, it will just 1 year in Arkansas and that's it. The metal conduit will last. I've had some of this stuff for 7 or 8 years. It'll really last longer. It may rust a little bit on the ends, but I've tried using PVC for this and it always cracks and breaks. And, at some point you're stressing it and that's where it kind of blows out. So, yeah, they also make little wires that are a little bit cheaper, but they kind of tend to float and move more. I really like this conduit because you can stab it in the ground and no wind will take it away. It's going to be there.
Well, now, are you basically making a U out of it and just sticking the bottom in the
Yep.
ground?
You buy the conduit, it's in 10-foot pieces. I cut 2 feet off and I make an 8-foot bow. And then I go about 1 foot into the ground on each side. So it's about a 6-foot, circle there, which gives you need a lot of airspace for the plant. You don't ever want to be covering a plant right over, especially when the sun's out. You're just increasing the humidity tenfold in that canopy, and so you can create problems just as quick as you can cure them in there. And sometimes even when it's sunny and hot, we have to vent the crops. Maybe we might just take the ends off and open them up. We may just clear the whole thing off depending on bug pressures and things like that. So this is another really cool product that I like to use, especially during the heat and during the early season. Powdered clay comes in a product called Surround, and what the clay does is really create a physical barrier to the plant. And I've really had a lot of luck with Surround in the cucurbit world, also in the fruit tree world. I don't have any fruit trees, but I've heard a lot of folks really give praises to this product. You can dip brand new transplants in the clay solution, mix it with water, and it really creates a physical barrier. It can also cool plants down during the stress. But it breathes, it allows air to transpire through the plant, so you're not blocking. It may look like you're strangling the plant there, but really it's clay, so it kind of has a porous surface, and air and water can move. But during the spring, when it's real rainy, it washes right off, so it's really something you have to reapply after each rain. But by, late spring, early summer, we don't have a lot of rain. That's kind of when I tend to use this more than ever. I'll mix fertilizer. I mix different fish emulsion, fish powders. I mix pesticides. I mix surfactants, which are sticker, yucca plant extracts. I'm an alchemist when it comes to figuring out what works, and this product kind of is the medium, and then you can mix everything else with it and it makes it stick to the plant. It's really just a way to take organic, short-living chemicals and kind of keep them alive longer on the plant.
Do you dip that or can you spray it?
You can spray it. I put it in a backpack sprayer. I use it for, so I have my black landscape fabric down. I'll even paint that stuff white in the summer with it to cool down the surface, So it's really versatile. And like one bag, what I pay on the internet for that big bag right there is like $25. And it goes a long way. I think I could probably take one bag and it'll last me 2 years, on the farm. So that's something to kind of go in on, maybe 2 or 3 people. It holds well. It's not like a lot of the chemicals. It's shelf stable for I think 5 years in the bag. So
What's added to this? It's wooden clay, and then what else is in there?
well, there's nothing else. Just the Surround. There's nothing. That's it. It's just powdered clay. But I add different things, to it.
It won't, it's just like powder.
Yeah.
It won't stick.
Right. Yeah. You need to mix it with water. Is that what you mean? Like, what is it mixed
You gotta
with?
mix it, yeah, I didn't know
Right.
if it comes that you can shake it and it's wet enough to stick.
No, I think as a dry product, I don't think it works. You have to wet it so it will stick, so it will kind of form that barrier, on the plant. That's really the
Is
idea.
that like Seven Dust used to be?
No, not
Seven
even.
Dust, I remember that was growing
No.
up.
Yeah, but it kind of looks like that when it's spread out. Yeah, yeah.
It sure did. It kept
Right,
that from coming.
right. Yeah, but no, it's really just clay. That's all it is. It's just a really fine powdered clay. So when you mix it up and you're spraying, it's almost like spray paint. It's just like white spray, And sticky traps, this is another important part. There are people who say you can control insects with sticky traps. I don't really try that. It takes a lot of sticky traps to really control pests. You need a lot, like 1 per plant probably, and you would still be, and you got all this sticky crap you have to take out of the garden. And so what I use them for is just to monitor and know. I kind of keep them on the borders, on the edges, like I was saying earlier, between the forest and the vegetables. I always try to put some sticky traps there so I can really monitor what's moving, what's migrating into the garden, what kind of insects are present at any period. I'll usually refresh the traps about once per month. We'll put some fresh sticky traps out. There are also, you can get pheromones that will go with the sticky traps if you're really trying to monitor particular pests like cucumber beetles, stink bugs. They all have particular lures that you can actually add to the sticky trap, and so when they're moving, because you're not just out there spraying or trying to kill something that may not even be very many of them out there. So
But how am I gonna know that's what they are? I don't know what they look like, so.
Right. Well,
It's gonna help me, I don't know.
Well, you got it stuck anyway. That's one. You're on the first step. You've got it, and you can see it. I mean, I think at that point, if you can't identify it, taking it to extension or getting somebody to look, at least you have it. I think that's an important part of identification is having something right in front of you. I have a lot of different guides and stuff that I look at, that compare to. So, but this is that threshold point, like I was talking about earlier. This is an important part of it, is knowing, well, how many squash bugs am I going to let in before I start spraying? Or how many cucumber beetles am I going to detect before we're going to start making a move? And I think 30% to me is that number. When I see 30% of this trap has bugs on it, this is like 50, 60% covered right there. But, about 30% is when I'm going to do something. I'm either covering plants, I'm spraying, I'm ripping out plants sometimes. If things are really heavy and the bugs are really attacking my plants, I'll rip them out and burn them. I do not take chances. I'm not a hospital or anything like that. So sick plants, they just go. That's really my perspective, and I'm trying to make a living, so I can't spend a lot of time babying a few plants and trying to bring them back, especially in the annual vegetable world. You don't have that time. You really only have a couple of windows to grow these kinds of crops, and you got to get them in, get them healthy, get them grown up before it's July and everything's trying to kill them. You don't want to have baby squash plants in July. They just, it's just a tough game to keep things alive. So you really want to have that program in place. Have just even a few sticky traps around is nice to see things moving. It's good as a gardener to just know what's coming in, what time of year is it. I like to keep notes on those things. I found so many bugs in the traps on this day of June. I try to keep as many good notes as I can and see from year to year how things change and what may have worked. And some things will work one year in Arkansas and they won't the next year. That really is just the nature of the game. When you have drought and you have flood and you have heat and you have cold, we have all of it in Arkansas. So you really just have to, it's just kind of every day is a new day. And I think that having a lot of these things in place is what makes you not go crazy when it's all going wrong. At least you have some steps and some rules to follow once that happens. And so these are a few products that I use. I wanted to talk a little bit about this. A lot of these are commercially available products, but I just want to mention the active ingredients. So when you are out looking for products on maybe a smaller scale, that you can at least compare and know some of the active ingredients, the things that work, because there's a ton of product out there. I mean, we can all go spend our whole, year's pay on product out there that doesn't work. And so it's good to know at least some of the things that are working, because if they're working on a larger scale farm, then they're likely to work, I think, in the garden. So the main thing I use as insecticide is pyrethrin. Pyrethrin essentially is chrysanthemum flower. And, pyrethroids are what we've developed because of the chrysanthemum flower, and they're way stronger. They wipe out everything really tough. But pyrethrin is still really effective. You can't overuse it, but you do need to find higher concentrations of it. A lot of products you find over the counter are just really low concentration, like 2 to 3%. They just don't do a good job on the tougher insects. And pyrethrins don't necessarily kill a lot of bugs either, but they do a really good job of pushing them out of the plant. So say like if you have the row covers and stuff, what we'll do is come in, pull the row covers off, spray everything, cover them back up, and that kind of gives us another week or maybe 10 days of not having bugs in the plants. We can kind of flush them. I always joke, that organic farming is, we're not killing anything. We're just moving it. We're just kind of pushing it over here and, and just kind of hoping that nothing gets built up too big to wipe everything out. We just kind of tend to use products that at least are mostly effective. So, but the important part of mixing and making these chemicals work is making sure the pH of your spray is right. That's really important. And it's something fairly simple to do. You can buy little pH test kits, dip it in your deal there. I keep just small amounts of sulfur and lime powders, and I can mix that in and I can buffer my pH. Getting the pH at a neutral is really important because the spray can hit and the pH is off, and you can see in a microscope a lot of those, it will like repel the molecules if the pH is off. So having the pH balanced makes the spray work effectively. It attaches to the plant, it attaches to the insect, it does what it's supposed to do. But if you're using city water, a lot of times the pH of city water is like 7.2, 7.4, somewhere in there. It's good to buffer things back down because it will decrease the utility of the product. So this is a Centria down here. This is like a pelleted pyrethrin that we use for like emerging insects. We sprinkle it around the plants. And so when bugs are coming out of the ground, they're getting hit by it, and it does a pretty good job of emerging bugs, caterpillars, things like that. It'll stop them. And also Mycotrol. This is both a mycopesticide and a mycofungicide. It's made from fungus, essentially. And so Mycotrol really is effective as a preventative measure. I use it kind of up front, just in a general spray program. And it's fairly inexpensive. That bottle is like a pint, and I think they're like maybe $40 or $50 for the pint. So, and diatomaceous earth too works pretty good. You can find it bulk pretty cheap, but it really only works on particular insects, very soft body, juvenile, young bugs. DE is great. It's very available, but you're limited what you can do with diatomaceous earth. So. And these are just specifically biological controls. These are probably some of the more important things I use on the farm. The Mycotrol again. And trust, this is, if you ever had Colorado potato beetles, I'm sure y'all have all dealt with those, flea beetles, fire ants, and just fleas in general, this stuff is like nuclear warfare to them. And it is a bacterial, I don't know if you have, spinosad is the name of the ingredient, and what you can buy on a consumer level is Monterey Garden Spray, and it has the spinosad in it as well. I buy the Entrust, this thing right here is $500 for that bottle right there. But it's like 30% spinosad, very high concentrate spinosad. I like one capful makes like 5 gallons, so it's pretty concentrated, but it's so effective. I just can't preach how much that product works. But do y'all have Monterey Garden Spray?
I don't. We've got spinosad. We've got it in that hose end right there.
Okay, right here. Yeah. See, so there's a lot of different, you can find those active ingredients in a lot of products, just like that. Spinosad. I buy the flea pill that I give my dogs. I don't know if y'all have ever seen that, but that's what's in the flea pill too. And that one works better than everything I've tried for fleas. That pill with spinosad is like the most amazing thing. And Actinovate is another one. These are living things. So the shelf life on these products are far shorter than a lot of other things too. So when you do buy these products, buy what you can use. Don't buy a lot of extra. I've learned that lesson. I've had to throw hundreds of dollars of stuff away. And so I usually go in with other farmers, other growers when we're trying to buy stuff and kind of coordinate together. But the Actinovate is great for potatoes. I use a lot of it in my potatoes. I'll actually I sprinkle it in the soil when I'm planting potatoes, and I'll usually make a spray out of it at least once or twice during the potato lifespan there. And you can buy Actinovate from little bitty bags up to like 50-pound bags of granulars. Another big part of what I do is cover crops. I think this is essentially, always joke, I had to go to California and pay a lot of money to learn that cover crops and compost are the secret to organic farming, and I hate that I had to do that. I'm glad I went to California and learned all that, but that really is the secret, that putting good compost in your soil and growing beneficial cover crops that get turned back into the soil really jumpstart soil, and they put it so far ahead of insect and diseases that even when those pressures do come, the plants can handle it. And I think that's really the key to organic farming, is not necessarily having a product for every problem, but having the prevention, having good soil health. Those things will keep you from ever having to deal with just total destruction in the garden anyway.
What's good cover crops?
So it depends on the season. Cover crops I look at like a tool belt. You really have to look at the bed, look at the plot, and say, what am I trying to do? Am I smothering weeds? Am I trying to build nitrogen? Am I trying to build biomass, organic matter? There's a cover crop for everything, for every season. Some of my favorites are buckwheat. Buckwheat grows really fast in the summer. You can have blooms like this cover crop right here is maybe 25, 30 days old. That's so quick. You can get this mass up knee high with blooms, bees covering them up just in like a month. You can really and lots of nitrogen too. You can work that crop back in and get 30 to 40 pounds of nitrogen per acre out of that crop. So it's all about timing and knowing, kind of tailoring I could do a whole another class just on cover crops, but it's important to use them. And if you really are serious about gardening organically, I think it's important to do the research and get out and find. In the summer, I use a lot of Sudan grass. That's one I really like. It grows really tall, really fast, and it will build upwards. I can add almost a whole % of organic matter every year by planting that crop. And there aren't a lot of sorghum Sudan. It's a hybrid between sorghum cane and Sudan grass. And so what we do is we bush hog that Sudan, and every time we bush hog it or mow it, the roots are just digging like a chisel plow. And it will build organic matter like nobody's business. We love that stuff. And when you look at it full grown, it's like nighttime on the soil floor. So no weeds can germinate. It does a really great job. It'll put you 2 or 3 years ahead on a plot by planting
Can
in
you
the
buy
summer.
it locally, or you have to buy it in bulk?
Yeah, Farmers sells it.
Co-op?
It comes in 50-pound bags though. So they may sell it in smaller quantities, but that's all I can ever get them to do it in. So that's one of the challenges, in organic growing is a lot of these things are bigger quantities. You got to work together to kind
Now, in
of.
the fall, I plant turnips, kale, and stuff or that's nutrients to the.
Absolutely. I plant a fall winter mix, which is really just like deer plot mix. I used to buy the fancy cover crop version, but I found out it's the same exact thing in a deer plot mix. You've got winter peas, rye, clover, oats. There's some vetch and rop, which is kind of similar to the in the cabbage family, and so it kind of has this up and down. Throughout the season, it'll green up really fast, but then it stays green all winter. And in spring, it'll kind of really start to bulk up and make biomass. And I work all that into the bed and plant my spring crops right into
Back
that.
to Farmers Co-op, will you get it?
Mm-hmm. Yep,
Okay.
yep. I do get that from them too. And just in general, I like to plant strips in between things when I can. If I have a bed that the timing is not right to plant another cash crop, it's so easy to go out and sow a cover crop onto those beds, and I think it pays dividends, it really does. So definitely want to include that. Just a few perennial plants. I really think that perennials are key. That said, there's so many perennials out there. This list that I found here is huge, but these are all kind of southern perennials that are on there. It's good to really schedule your garden to where you have flowers year round. And so when you're choosing perennials, choose flowers in between. If you're going to have a big summer garden, you want things that are going to flower early in the spring, and you want things that are going to flower at the end of the season, your hotter season. Things you want to get those June, July blooms in there, and even August, September, some of your, like the... what's the succulent I'm looking like? The Veronicas, and those things are blooming in August, something like that. You kind of want, sedum, that was what I was looking for, yeah. But you want to really plan blooms for in between. So when you don't have blooms in the garden, you have blooms outside of the garden. That will keep those bugs coming. Phlox, I love phlox. I have tons of it around, just in corners and edges. It'll grow just about anywhere. You can put it in a crack in the sidewalk, I feel like, and that stuff will grow out of it. And coneflower too is another one of those, totally hardy, tough, it'll handle drought, and it's very forgiving. Most perennials, that's why I love them. They're very forgiving. Even if they do die because of your management, they usually come back. Even if you do give them their worst, and they will still come back somehow. Just a few more. That was another coneflower, Culver's root, and the rattlesnake plant, and the cup plant. Those are some really cool late blooming crops there. So, but I think the key really is in the beginning is choosing good plant material. If you're choosing northern plants, northern seeds, you're gonna fail. Some things may do good, but if you're trying to grow things that aren't adapted here, you're gonna see more bugs, you're gonna see more diseases, you're gonna have more problems. And I use a lot of different techniques to grow things longer season and to start earlier. And so we have hoop houses, we have shade cloth, we have low tunnels over the ground with shade cloth, and we do a lot of things. But on the home garden scale, you don't necessarily have all those tools to to grow things. So it's good to pick good material. It's good to go shop in person at the nursery, be there, look at the plant material, check for diseases, buy from, reputable places like River Valley that are buying in fresh material all the time. That's really important. That's something I learned working here. It seems like there's a ton of stuff, but you have to constantly be bringing this fresh material to guarantee your customers that there are no diseases. If you keep the same material around for years and years, you have the same diseases and you're just putting them on your customer's plate, So it's good to choose places that are really re-upping their supply regularly. And planting out of season is another thing. Even with perennials, if you plant during stress, you plant out of season, you're going to get more bugs, you're going to get more diseases. Timing, I think, is critical with that stuff. So being proactive is just as important as being reactive, I think. And so choosing varieties, this is important. There's a lot of varieties out there. There's a lot of things you can buy in the vegetable world. Most of them aren't made for the South. That's kind of the problem. You look through these catalogs, it all looks so beautiful. You want all of it. It's January. You just order everything. That's what I do anyway. I spend way too much money. I'm like, what did I get all these seeds for? But it's really important. These seed catalogs are more and more marketing towards us as Southern growers. And so I think it's important to read carefully, look even further than the seed catalog, find reviews, find other gardeners that are growing it, do the research up front, because that's going to determine your success, really. And so I also, a new tool that we have is grafted plants, and this is something I think that has made heirloom tomatoes a reality for the South, and now that we can do grafted plants, I kicked heirlooms off of my farm for several years because I just couldn't do it profitably. They were taking up all this space. I may get a few tomatoes, but it was just always a headache. And I'm sure every home gardener wants an heirloom tomato. And so, I can spend $3, $4 on a grafted plant, and they're plugs, so they're pretty small. I mean, I pay $3 something for a plant that's real little, but the yields, I've estimated 3 to 4 times the yield is what I got. I needed less water, less disease problems, just in general, a total win with grafted plants. And we're going to try some grafted watermelons and grafted eggplant this year too, to kind of see how that works. You can buy a lot of those grafted plants. I do a lot of stuff through Johnny's. Johnny Seeds, they handle them. I actually work with the broker that brokers to Johnny's. I can buy whole flats. They're like $400 for a flat of plants. So they're pretty pricey. Another one of those things you may have to go in on with some other growers, to kind of make it cost effective. So, but yeah, and just really looking hard. I mean, these seed catalogs have come a long way since I started. I used to get 3 or 4. I just looked this morning. I bet I've got 50 on the kitchen table. It's like out of hand. I'm finally to the point. I'm going to start calling these places and canceling some of them. I don't even know where some of these come from. How do they get my address? They're just covered my kitchen table at this point. So, but it's good to have material in the winter to look at. I like it. It's good research material. So when we talk about diseases and bugs, this may not seem directly related, but it really is key. Moisture management is absolutely critical to maintaining disease-free, bug-free garden. Because if you're overwatering or you're underwatering, you are creating a giant open door for bugs in your garden. And drip irrigation really is the only way to do it. If you're not drip irrigating, just leave here today and tell yourself that's the only way you're ever going to water after that. Because it really is the only economical way to be sure you're watering your plant exactly enough, you're not giving it too much water, and it's fairly inexpensive. Some of the installation, getting the infrastructure may cost you a little bit of money, but the actual drip tape, the fittings, that stuff is negligible and you can hook timers up, you can have things really well managed that way. And when your plant is watered exactly right, it's tough. It's not going to have the same bugs and disease aren't going to have the same impact on your plant if it's well nourished and well watered. But if the same thing, if it's overwatered, it's underwatered, your plant is just wide open and it's ready. When the bugs start feeding on it, it's just going to open up and let them eat it all the way down. Versus a plant that's strong, healthy, it's going to close its doors. It's going to throw up all of its defense mechanisms when the bug starts eating, and it's got a much better shot at weathering those events. So I think it's important. Also, landscape fabric. I use a ton of this on my farm, and it really keeps the moisture in. I lay my drip and then put the fabric on top of that. Like in our perennial beds, we'll even put mulch on top of the fabric there. And so we can get, I may not have to go back to that bed for another year or so. But I reuse everything I do in the vegetable beds. I'll reuse it in my pathways. I use it the first year in the bed, and then it goes down in the pathway the second year. But I think that stuff really pays for itself the first season, for sure.
When you're placing the plants, are you placing them where the water is, or are you placing them between the two?
Just right off of it. I mean, the plant's going to be like right here,
Okay.
literally right on the
So
line.
you've got your borders marked.
Hmm. You don't want the drip tape, you don't want the water to drip on the root, but within an inch or two of it is fine. Yeah. Hmm. Any other questions on that one? And this is another important one. Like we talked about pH in the spray, but this is in the soil. Your nutrients are available based on pH. So you can put everything that tomato plant or squash plant needs. It can all be right there. And your pH can be off by 0.5 point, and it's like you've cut the availability in half. So even though the calcium, tomatoes are a really good example. Tomatoes need calcium. But if the pH is off, they're dying. They're starving for calcium. And you may have 5 times the calcium you need in the soil, but the plant just can't access it. And so pH is something that has to be done up front. You can't change pH in the middle of a crop. It is near impossible. I've tried, promise you, you won't do it. Even in the conventional world, it's incredibly difficult to change pH during the growing season. So it's important to, when you're doing your soil samples, to be paying attention to that pH, get it right in the beginning of the year, and you will absolutely save money all the way through the rest of the season. You won't have to pile on nutrients. You won't have these deficiencies during heat stress and things like that. You'll be right here in the middle. You want to be between the 6.5 and 7. You can see all of those nutrients are available at their maximum amount.
Now, when you have a drip system,
Mm-hmm.
how do you figure out, if you have a timer on it,
Mm-hmm.
how do you figure out how long to set it so it really gets to where it needs to go?
Well, every drip tape has a different flow rate, and so it's all based on that. It's based on how far away the emitters are and the rate per hour that it's dripping. And so that's kind of what you need to know. Like, I think my tape is all 0.3 gallons per hour, so I can determine, I need X number of gallons per week, and so I know I can get it down. Well, I need to water 30 minutes today, 30 minutes 2 days from now. That's kind of how I break my watering schedule down. But they're all different. There's soaker type drip that lets out lots of water, high flow rate, or you can be down to like 0.1 gallon per hour and really drip slowly. So it's kind of good when you're buying your drip tape to know that. What kinds of plants are you going to be growing? If you're growing summer annuals, need a lot of water. So you don't want to use a real low flow drip tape. You want something in between. I use what's called a mid flow, and that's about 0.35 gallons per hour. So
Does that affect the diameter of the tape you're using? I mean, because some of the diameter is really tiny.
well, what I just use kind of one standard brand, and I mean you can get it in from like 6-inch apart, which will put out a ton of water, up to like 1.5 feet apart, which I use for like blackberries and things like that. So it's just a matter of finding the right fit. There's a lot of stuff out there. Mm-hmm. And so when it comes to record keeping, this is something I like to share with those of you who are on the garden scale and want to keep records. This is an incredibly important tool on my farm. And if you've ever used open source software, when I was in college, I used a lot of open source Word, open source PowerPoint, because it's free, because I couldn't afford the Microsoft version of it, And so open source crop planning is basically Google code. And what this lets you do is create your own garden plan. Just with kind of a scratch plan, you're able to insert all the crops that you like to grow, and you can keep notes about those crops. You can insert those crops into a plan. You can keep up with it year to year. I have about 5 years now of plans, so I can look back every year. I know what bed I can even do a search in the software. I can say, where has squash been the last 3 years? And it'll tell me every bed I planted squash in. So I know beginning the season, well, I'm not going to, I know kind of with my rotations what to plant where. And so, you can do this on a very simple level and just keep a notebook. But, I think for those of us who like techno stuff, and this has been great for me. It's very simple. It's free. That's the most important part. It costs $0. And you can kind of make it however you want it. I use this software to generate my seed list, what I'm buying my seed. It generates a harvest list for my chefs. I can give them one thing that shows all the crops I grow in a year and when they're available. Just one piece of paper, and they all love that. And it's good even just at home. If you want to plan out the year, hey, I want to have this much food, I want to have these crops to eat on the table, it's good to have something, some plans ahead. And it gives you a place to write notes on things. Hey, this crop got eaten up by this bug, or this disease attacked this plant on this day. It's really good to have those records, because as you do this year after year, and those of you who have been doing it for many years, you can probably agree that knowing what you did and what worked, that pays off, because every year is a new year in Arkansas, and sometimes you can go back and compare, well, this year was kind of like this year, and so maybe you can have some similar things that work or don't work. So, and just to kind of wrap up, I believe this is, to be organic, I get this question a lot. It's not becoming organic that is hard. It's very easy to become certified. You just need ground that hadn't had chemicals on it for 3 years, and you can get certification. But it's staying organic, and it's making money as an organic producer. Therein lies the challenge, to keep things growing productively without conventional products is very challenging. And so I believe that you really need a healthy system to do it. That's the key. So if you address all of these slices of the pie, you're much less likely to lose entire crops. You're still going to have bugs, you're still going to have diseases. That's just part of the reality in Arkansas, but you can mitigate them greatly by looking at the whole slice of the pie. And I think keeping records is so important. I can't stress that enough. Even if you have a very small garden, keeping records will pay off, and it will save you money. It may be $50, it may be $100, but it will save you money to keep records. I like to record a lot of weather info too. I have a lot of high-tech stuff now on the farm. I'm kind of creating an almanac every day on our farm, because I'm recording temperatures in all my greenhouses. I'm recording temperatures outside, the weather, everything's recorded every day. And I can look back now for almost 3 years, and I can get all that data at any point. It's all stored in the cloud, and there's some really cool techno stuff out there to help you keep records, but it's as complicated as you want it to be. If you want it to be simple, just keep a journal. I think that's just as effective as the fanciest techno devices. So,
Josh,
yes.
how do you keep animals like armadillos and possums and raccoons?
Yes. I love this question. I got this in the last one. Where I live, we have lots of guns, and we have plenty of bullets, and we shoot freely. That's not a luxury of most folks in the city, though. It's just not something you all get the opportunity to do. So, I use electric netting is something that really works well. Electrified netting is fairly inexpensive, and you can stretch it, around the garden. There's a lot of different products too. Plant Skid is a good one. I know River Valley carries that. Plant Skid. It's just like a blood-based substance. It actually is organic allowed too. And it just uses protein. It'll keep away deer, raccoons, that kind of stuff. But with anything in organic world, you have to reapply every time it rains. So every time you get those kinds of weather, you have to go back out and do it again. Y'all still carry Plant Skid, right? Yeah. I think it's blood-based or something like that. Yeah.
You got that? You guys?
Mm-hmm.
Like something is roaming around my yard right now. I've got a big yard in the beds, and it makes a really deep print that's this deep, and it's this big around. And I'm thinking, what the heck?
A vole, maybe. Yeah.
It's been all my a mole.
You're talking about print, not
Vole with a V.
Yeah.
A vole.
It's a vole.
Is it like a footprint?
It's like in the dirt, and it's this fit around and about that deep. And the other night, my dog just went crazy, crazy, crazy. I finally had to shut off the dog door. The next morning, I went out just to look, and in all my beds, there was this deep print. I thought, what the heck? This has to be a heavy animal.
It could be armadillos too, because they stick their noses down like that, and they're kind of trying to pull things out, like worms and different things like grubs. You know, that could be.
Once upon a time, like a year ago, I looked out the window at night, and the light came on outside, since I saw an armadillo.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I live right in the middle of the city.
What we used to do, if you run up on them quick enough and kick them, they'll roll up into a ball. That's how I used to sneak. You know, you can sneak up on them pretty quick, but I wouldn't recommend that. Hillbilly soccer is what we called that. Yeah, there you go. Put it on your neighbor. That'll work.
How do you get rid of moles in your yard? Is there, because I have a friend that's got that big time.
Okay, so moles are something I deal with a lot.
I'll talk to you later.
Sure, no, I think moles. Does anybody else deal with moles? You guys have moles in the garden? Yeah. I've been dealing with moles a lot, you know, and moles are better than gophers because at least they don't eat the plant. The moles are after the worms, you know, and so, but they're still a nightmare, you know, and so I've tried traps. I bought these special traps and they work, but moles have this fantastic snout and they can smell so good that the first time you put that trap there, if you don't catch him, it's over. That mole is ruined. He will never touch your trap ever again. So what we've been doing is putting in barrier. I rent a trencher from the local, probably Hums or, you know, one of those places, and I just ran a trench all the way around my garden and put sheet metal that was about that big in the trench all the way around. That's the only way I could really tell you 100% to keep moles out, because they're vicious. I mean, you can trap and stay on them, and there still be that one just walk right through the middle, you know, like, yeah, they are absolutely. When I lived in California, gophers were the problem, and a gopher would just take the plant and just suck it right down the ground. That you could watch them in the garden. They would go down through there and just like a Caddyshack, you know, on there. And it was very much like that. I've sat in the garden many times, and so I've always been grateful. At least the mole is a little kinder. You know, he just wants the worm. He doesn't want the whole plant, you know. So
he does it slow.
You're right. He's taking his time, right? But they reproduce quickly. Yes, sir.
How do you work in the Sudan grass? How tall do you let it get?
Okay, usually we plant in April, beginning of May, right there at the first week of May. I'll let it get about head high before I mow it the first time. We just mow it either with the flail mower. I have a small flail mower which chops it really good. But I'll also bush hog it early. The last mow, I like to just chop it as good as I can and then just plow that. That's it. I mean,
Pretty good root system, doesn't it?
big time. Yeah. They have a major root system. So it takes a couple passes with the plow usually to break it up. But the thing is if you let it go all the way, this last year what I did is I let it go all the way to frost, and I bush hogged it, and then I let the frost kill it, and it was really easy because it was all kind of crispy already, you know, and so it was a little bit easier to turn in. But if you're trying to get nitrogen, you don't want to do that. You want it to be green when you turn it in. So it's based on kind of what you want to do.
So that's like a fallow crop. Like, when do you come back and plant over the top of that?
Well, like with sorghum Sudan, typically I like to use it for sweet potatoes. I always plant sorghum Sudan before sweet potatoes. So I plant the sorghum Sudan in April, and then sweet potatoes go in the ground like in June. So what I'll do is I'll bush hog, make my sweet potato bed, and plant right into it, you know, right behind that. But it's all timing, you know. I mean, you can do it as a fallow crop, or you can plant right on top of it.
Right over the roots and everything. Right?
Yep.
That whole mess.
Yep, I know plenty of growers who roll or crimp it, so they don't even bush hog it. A roller crimper just knocks it over and kind of crushes it and makes it stop growing, and they'll plant crops right into that, you know, on top of it. Because it gives you a nice mat. It's just like a thick mat on top. You don't have weeds for 6 weeks, you know, after that. And so you the weeds have already been weakened because they're trying to compete with that, and then boom, you're planting something into it, so you have a nice window, you know, there. So.
When do you do the nematodes? Is there a window for that?
I usually do 2 to 3 applications. They say in the spring is the most effective. Once it's hot, they do nothing. They die quickly. We put them out. We can do it a couple of different ways. You can put them out in a watering can. You can put them out through your drip system. You can put them out through Sprinklers, if you have a big open spot, you can actually just take an overhead sprinkler and put them out on the plot like that.
So springtime, mainly.
Yes, springtime is really when they'll take hold, they'll reproduce well, they'll move around your soil, and winter it's too cold, summer it's too hot, but typically in fall we'll try to do another application if we can. They cost, I think it's about like per acre. You can buy a pack that's like either they have like garden size and then farm size, and they have ranch size. It's like a bunch of them, So it can, I think it starts at like $50 and goes up to $200 or $300 for the big packs. Yeah.
Do you consider asparagus a perennial?
I do, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't consider it like something in the beneficial category, but, it's something that keeps on coming. And, I know asparagus plots that are 20, 30 years old that'll still, that'll still make great asparagus, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I mean, does it work the same as perennial border?
Well, not really, because, in the first year you get flowers, but that's the key. What you're really looking for in good perennials for beneficials is strong odor flowers that are going to draw things in, and that also kind of create habitat, like small trees, things like that create places where things can live on them. Mm-hmm. I think it's still a great perennial to have, but I wouldn't put it in that category of the border stuff. So, yeah. If you put it on your border, you're just inviting the bugs to come eat more of it, probably. Yeah. But the way it grows, it's so aggressive, it probably needs to be kind of out in its own. Yeah, that stuff goes, it really, once it's going, it really will take off. So.
Do armadillos go around in herds or little packs?
Yeah. I've never really seen them in packs, no. They seem pretty solitary to me. I'm not a biologist by any, stretch of the word. I think they're opportunists. I think an armadillo is a scavenger, so it's, it's going to eat anything. It's after anything. That's kind of why they're hard to, a lot of times determine what it is, because they don't care. They're opportunists. If it's got nutrition, they will eat it, and if they can't find something, they'll change their diet just to keep food in their bodies, so. Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
What do you use on your sweet corn for worms?
Well, so I don't grow any sweet corn on the organic farm, but I can give you a couple. One of the big things, University of Oklahoma has been doing a lot of research on this, and what they have found is the trichogama wasp is the most important insect on any farm anywhere. The trichogama wasp you can buy from Arbico as well. What they were doing is releasing the trichogamas every 2 weeks in their sweet corn, and these things feed on that corn earworm. And so, you can look on the University of Oklahoma website, and they've got some data on that, because I think it was like 5,000 per acre, 5,000 wasps every other week or so. It was a pretty tight schedule. You had to release them every so often. But the things that have worked in the past, they make this little called a zeolator, and you go and you have to inject each ear of corn with a mineral oil. And that kind of covers the ear, protects that worm from, walking in to the end of it. But, organic corn is one of those things that it's like a myth, it's like a legend of, because first you got to get all that nitrogen there, and that organically it's hard. You don't want all the nitrogen, you want 30% of the nitrogen in the soil, and the other 70% has to be put on the plant at the stage, at the second, third leaf stage. So organically, it's hard to get 70% of your nitrogen all onto the plant at once. You're dumping buckets of fish emulsion to get that kind of nitrogen on there. So it's tough. I've had to, that's one of those I just don't grow, because I've tried, it's kind of like squash and cucumbers. I love those crops, but it's hard to make a profit on them, on the farm. So not to say you shouldn't grow them, but they're just very challenging, so.
So you don't want us calling, but we can email you?
Oh, absolutely. Call me too. I have a 2-year-old and I go to school and run 2 farms, so I don't know if I'll always answer, but I love to share. That's why I'm here. I think that none of us can do what we do if we don't share information. I think it's important. If you're trying to figure all this out on your own and do that, it's just a nightmare. And so what's helped me to get to where I am is having lots of really smart people who are willing to share and who don't see me as a threat, but they see me as, somebody they want to share their information with. And I've been grateful to have a lot of older farmers who've, respected me enough to share and kind of tell me their secrets. And that's why I like to keep sharing them, keep them alive. So this slideshow, if you want to access it after here, you can go on slideshare.net and you can search River Valley Horticulture or the title, which is Making the Most of Organic. It's a fairly easy search engine on SlideShare, and you can get the whole slideshow right there if you need to refer back to anything.
What was your email again?
Oh, I'm sorry. laughingstockfarms@gmail.com. I have some cards too if anybody wants to take one with them as well. Anything else? Anything from the other room? Is anybody over there?
I think we've emptied into
Oh, okay. All right, good, good.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you. Thank you all very much.